Welcome everybody to TrineDay's RoundTable 50. Our big tent welcomes all warriors for peace and friendship. TrineDay's Valediction Roundtables explores a trinity of the Fitzgerald legacy, JFK's vision for peace, Henry George's economics of peace, and the nonviolent movement of Afghan leader Bhadshah Khan. Since 2021, our discussions have traced centuries of imperialism and ritual power while exploring the path towards sovereignty and peace. Now, as we reach a turning point, our final piece comes into focus. It is not only peace we must build, but friendship. We ground this realization in lived experience through the voice of Mir Rahimi, born into relentless war in Afghanistan and now living in Britain. His memoir, Across Mountains, Land and Sea, reveals that true peace is not forged through ideology or domination, but through the preservation of our shared humanity. His journey affirms that what we have been uncovering all along, that breaking the cycle of violence begins within. As we reflect on the lives and sacrifices of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr., we are reminded that those who move toward peace, justice, and human unity have often been met with powerful resistance. Yet, their transformations of conscience and courage continue to light a path forward through the darkness. Mir's vision of peace, combined with the trinity of JFK's peace plan, Henry George's sacred economics, Bhadshah Khan's nonviolent movement, converge here, aligned, enduring, and moving forward together. In this roundtable, we open the big tent, welcoming all who are ready to step beyond conflict and into a future grounded in both peace and friendship. Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould are the authors of the Valediction series who have developed the plan for world peace, which you can find at valediction.net. Click on world peace and you can take a look at that plan from there. Today, we will hear from a few speakers, then we want everyone to chime in on how we can make peace the foundation of our reality. But before that, a few words from our host, publisher Chris Milligan.
Adam, thank you very, very much for all of that. And we are on a journey here, hopefully towards peace and a better world. And one thing I've always talked about is about how we're doing this for the children. And I had seen a quote this last week from Sitting Bull and sent it to Liz, and Liz says, "Well, you ought to talk about that." And so I'm going to start off with this quote from Sitting Bull, and then I like to also start with some quotes from JFK, and so I did a search, a little Google search. I put in JFK speeches and warriors, and you know what came up with the most recommendation was his inaugural speech, which I found very, very interesting. So after Sitting Bull's quote here, I'm going to give a little bit of JFK's inaugural speech. And, when I was looking at it, one thing that really stuck out at me is how much the world, our country, and our politics has changed. And I don't know if it's for the better or not, but we'll start here. Sitting Bull. For us, warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights, because no one has the right to take another life. The warrior for us is one who sacrifices himself for the good of others. His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of humanity. And now from JFK's inaugural. We observe today not the victory of a party, but the celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century 3/4 ago. The world is very different now. For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of the first revolution. Let the world go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by hard and a bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardships, support any foe, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty. This much we pledge and more. To those old allies whose cultural and spiritual origins we share, we pledge the loyalty of faithful friends. United, there is little we cannot do in a host of cooperative ventures. Divided, there is little we can do, for we dare not meet powerful challenges at odds and split asunder. To those new states whom we welcome to the ranks of the free, we pledge our world that one form of colonial control shall not have passed away merely to be replaced by a far more iron tyranny. We shall not always expect to find them supporting our view, but we shall always hope to find them strongly supporting their own freedom, and to remember that in the past, those who foolishly sought power by riding the back of the tiger ended up inside. To those people in the huts and villages of half the globe struggling to break the bonds of mass misery, we pledge our best efforts to help them help themselves for whatever period is required. Not because somebody else may be doing it, not because we seek their votes, but because it is right. If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. So let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness and sincerity is not a subject to proof. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Let both sides explore what problems unite us instead of belaboring those problems which divide us. Let both sides for the first time formulate serious and precise proposals for the inspection and control of arms, and bring the absolute power to destroy other nations under absolute control of all nations. Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the deserts, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depths, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let us unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free. And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion, let us join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans have been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though embattled we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle each year in, year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history, the final judge of our deeds. Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. I mean,
wow.
Hasn't the world changed a bit from the politics and our leaders? And, you know, today is tax day. And, you know, part of this roundtables have been bringing together JFK vision of peace and Henry George's extraordinary thinking to make our world a better place and bring capitalism a bit to heel. And we're going to have Alana Hartock, who's part of the Henry George group, give a little talk here. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, hearing those idealisms, those aspirations and inspirations of JFK, I mean, I just feel like crying. I mean, the dark side is so profound right now. And also, just as he was being inaugurated and starting off as president, the CIA had killed Lumumba. And he was so in favor and supportive of Lumumba's democratic revolution in the Congo. And they hid that from him and they acted without him. And this is this deep state that we are all going to have to play our part to do something about. So, I mean, I started out interested as a young woman in exploring the human potential, the furthest reaches of human capacity. I was interested in psychic phenomena and parapsychology. If that was true, then that meant we're so much more than we've been told that we are as human beings. So before I talk a little more about thoughts on taxes, and as it is tax day, and as we all have feelings about taxes, I want to do a little fun thing and have everybody please put in the chat your thoughts and feelings about taxes. Okay, because I never thought I would be interested in taxes when I started out, but now I see it's crucial. This is how we relate way beyond just voting for people. It's how we relate to our government. It is our blood, sweat, and tears that we send through our labor, our work, our energy to government, to finance. So it is so key. Some say the power to tax is the power to create or destroy. Oh, if you would please, let's just put in chat, and we'll look at your thoughts and feelings on taxes. But first, I mentioned interest in psychic phenomena and continue to be. And so here's a report from the other side from our colleague and friend and longtime TrineDay participant, Wendell Fitzgerald, who was my brother in the Henry George movement. So his roommate, where he lived in the house in Oregon, has a sister's friend or wife's friend. And you can communicate with people on the other side. If you guys don't want to believe this, that's okay. But some of us do believe in multidimensionality. So Wendell briefly says he's happy, he's doing fine, and he's learning a lot. So Wendell was a high soul, and I'm glad that he's crossed over to a more expanded realm, and we may be hearing from him again. So just that little tidbit for, if you believe it or not, that's from Wendell. And now back to the taxes. The reason I'm so interested in this is because I'm concerned about poverty and wealth inequality, the things that Kennedy and all of us are concerned about, and war. And I searched long and hard to try to understand the root causes of these things. And when I came across Henry George economics, it answered my questions in 5-week course. It just like economic enlightenment blew me away. So it became my life work for decades now. But the taxes are so crucial. I wanted to see if I can bring up a couple of, first, a funny quote is, "Dear IRS, I am writing to you to cancel my subscription. Please remove my name from your mailing list." That's from Snoopy. Okay. And then a sobering one from Thomas Jefferson. "To compel a man to furnish funds for the propagation of ideas he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical." The same guy that put in the Declaration of Independence that when a government no longer serves the people, they have the right to abolish it and start a new one. I don't know how many of you think we can reform what's happening in Washington, D.C., but I have no hope there. I think we're going to need to build and strengthen our local communities and economies and our local people. Everywhere there's growing homelessness, and I just feel my heart breaks when I think all the young people who can't find housing. There's people working and they can't find affordable housing. We are being ground down. 45-50% of us are living in this country hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. We know this is a serious and severe problem, and we're paying for it. We're paying to keep the system this way, so we got to figure out a new way to interact with governance. What is a new form of governance that solves these many problems? Because there's a crack in our Liberty Bell. That freedom is the inscription on the Liberty Bell. Proclaim freedom throughout all the land and unto all the inhabitants thereof. What an aspiration. That's from Leviticus 25, but there's a crack in that Liberty Bell. But Leviticus 5 is the promise that was broken because of the imperfection of democracy. Leviticus 25 are the Jubilee justice laws. They allow for fair share rights to the land, for the creator's gifts of land and resources, the earth itself, and debt cancellation. We're never going to pay off this multi-trillion-dollar debt. What are we going to do? Keep passing the burden on to the children's children. Needs to be some kind of debt cancellation here. And with having the money system in a fair way, and the land system, and the tax system, it'll be a new form of democracy. And we can create a Liberty Bell that's not cracked, that's beautiful and rings clear and true.
Amen.
So, let's see if any comments came in chat on taxes. One American News Network, that's not it. Anybody put? Keep your mic on. Documentary. A documentary that indicates federal income tax is illegal and unconstitutional. Yes, that keeps coming up, that it's not even constitutional to pay income tax. Adam says he agrees. Oscar says 2-bedroom apartment, East Coast in Canada is $22,400 a month. Oh, and the housing prices, like everywhere in Canada, are out of the roof. Okay, Gordon, thanks for getting on board. I can only listen, communicate on chat. My thoughts on income taxes. I've recently discovered that paying these taxes is voluntary, so I refuse to file a 1040. And these forms for the time being, for the first time, he's refused to pay. Yay. That might be foolhardy. I'll wait and see, but I cannot, but good conscience, give my money to criminals. That is the point. That is the point. How can we talk about peace and pay for war? So thank you, Gordon. So those are the key ones that came in on taxes. Serious issue. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much. So you wanted to speak, Liz, and I'm going to go ahead and change the view here. Oops. Go for it, Liz.
Whoops, she's muted.
Oh, I know. Okay, good. All right. I'm just going to give a little introduction to set Mir's talk up for you. And as laid out in Roundtable 49, we are here today to advance the trinity of JFK's World Peace Plan, Henry George's economic justice, and Bhadshah Khan's nonviolent peace movement on the platform of friendship inspired by Mir Rahimi's story. The excitement that we are on the right path was enhanced tenfold when Mir revealed recently to us that his name, the name his family gave him, means world peace. The synchronicity was crystal clear. Mir's mission in life was sealed at birth, and its full potential is unfolding before our eyes. Long ago, we asked the question, who will be the beneficiary of our effort to create world peace? Who will we serve? The answer was always for the children, as our host, Chris Milligan, has been reminding us since the first roundtable in 2021, and Mir has so effectively authenticated in his memoir. Today, Mir will introduce you to his mother as the first and most important hero. The trajectory that led Mir to be here with us, carrying the voice for the children of war, was made possible every day in his life in war-torn Afghanistan. And it was the very real work of his family community and especially his mother. And we all need to learn from this great teacher. Getting this message out became more urgent after the American leaders displayed their total disregard for international law on February 28th in the opening assault on Iran, when a missile struck a girls' school, killing more than 170 people, mostly children. The best way to confront this criminality is to become heroes for all children by standing shoulder to shoulder with us to guarantee their well-being. The fact is, if we don't do it, who will? To add another layer of urgency to this message, we heard an interview with Marine Captain Matt Ho titled, "Will U.S. Troops Bomb Civilian Sites?" It was when Matt told the story about an Iranian child and her father that catapulted our focus on children to revelation. This is a quote from the interview. There was a man who claimed to have hit one of the American helicopters when he was interviewed on an Iranian news program. He had his young daughter with him because she would not stay in the house even though he was shooting at the American helicopter. He didn't want her to come out. She was defiant and urging him on. And when the newscaster asked this young girl, "Why were you urging your father to shoot the Americans?" her reply is horrific. The young girl on Iran TV said, "We need to kill Americans because they're child killers." I mean, that's who we are in this war. That's the end of Matt's quote. Always keep in mind that the future is not fixed, and if you don't like what's being offered, imagine your own future. That's what we've done, and you can make it a difference by joining with us to help Mir's dream of world peace for all children come true. We are convinced that once Mir's story is spread far and wide, warriors who are now questioning what war's true purpose it really is, especially as it regards children, will want to become warriors for peace. And now Mir will dig deeper into the role of his mother, played not just for him and his family, but for his whole community. There is much to learn about what made it possible for Mir's war experience from birth to leaving home at 13 years old across mountains, land, and sea to be completed in adulthood with real hope for the future. Today's discussion will be the opportunity to add your thoughts on how we can all create a peaceful world for the children, the future for humanity. And Mir, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that great talk and introduction. And thank you, Alana, for your great talk. And thank you, Chris, as always, for leading these meetings roundtable. So thank you all very much. And thank you for inviting me again to be here with you. It is a great honor to talk to you about these great ideals of world peace, even as it seems that things are going the other way. So as Liz kindly mentioned that I should introduce a little bit about my mother and how she dealt with the difficult situations in war, constant war in Afghanistan, when she was at the same time raising me and my family. So I think the best way to do is to just read a few sections from my book, where in the first chapter where I talk about my mother, particularly from the day that I was born. So if that's okay, I think if I read these bits and pieces, hopefully that gives a little bit introduction about how she was dealing and what was her hopes and dreams and struggles during those dark and difficult times of war and conflict. So if I start right from the beginning, I was born in a house with bullet holes in the walls, just before dawn, in the middle of a winter in the mountains of central Afghanistan. My mother, whose response to any news, however bad, was "God is kind," gave birth to me alone in the freezing darkness. I imagined first her, then my cries echoing through the empty valley, our animals lifting their heads up with curiosity in the next room. Everyone left alive in the valley who was not fighting had fled, but my mother had been too pregnant to leave. She would not have left even if she could have. She believed it was better to die in your home than on the run. I have often thought of that. It is more than 20 years since, and I still wake with the smell of the snow, the echoes of gunfire across the valley. But these memories from my childhood are just out of reach and slippery somehow, like a bright fish flashing through my hands. My world was small. It could be walked across in one morning. I remember it now in pieces. The bright sky is snaked like a rope above us between the ice-topped mountains rising on every side. The sun would appear in the morning from behind the mountain peaks in the east and sweep over the valley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Touching our house and then disappear behind another mountain peak west of the valley. A brief moment of brightness in the deep shadow. I remember the sounds of my mother praying as the light started across the valley. I would hear her whispering in the darkness as the animals stirred and grumbled in the next room. I remember the belligerent call of our long-legged rooster. I remember the smell of smoke as she started a fire for breakfast, the bright orange of the cornbread the black tea, the pure white of the goat's milk. I remember her hands, her mouth, the lines around her eyes. My memories of her are never still. She is always moving, showing my sister, Farouk, how to do something, stopping to touch the back of my head. And I remember the feeling that there was never any problems that she could not solve, that she was the strongest and bravest. She refused to hide. God is kind. She would always whisper, everything will be all right. And that was her motto, God is kind and everything will be all right. If there was war and the sounds of machine gun echoing, she would say that. And if there were moments in time when this section of Afghanistan was blockaded for years, that nothing could go in or out, by that I mean no goods or human beings, she would always help other people in the neighborhood. If the neighbors had little to eat, she would share what we had. And one day, after many years of blockade and sanctions to starve the people in that region, she came home with a starving little child. So I'm just going to find that. I just want to read that section for you. I apologize, I could not find it. So when there was a moment when the area of central Afghanistan was blockaded and sanctioned to starve the people, and the families who could not feed their children had started abandoning them. So one day she came home with this very starving little child that she had found in one of the riverbeds, and initially she was feeding her with goat's milk, and then she started to get better, and then became quite healthy. Sort of for many years she stayed with us and then my mother went and found their family to return her. Or when there were moments when the fighting would briefly stop, and then she would go and bring the communities together, not many men, but the women, and to find some literacy teacher, and then bring children together so they could be taught some education. So she was this leader of some sort in the community. Whenever there was no war, she would help bring communities together. Or if there was war, or if there was, I remember at times when armed men, hundreds of them would sort of storm the village. She would go and stand at the door and telling them that you are not allowed to come to my house or to terrorize my children. If you need food, I'll give it to you. If you need bread, I will give it to you. Because they would come to kill animals and feed themselves. If you need a cow, you can go and kill it. If you need sheep and goats, and I'm happy, but you cannot come and terrorize my children. So she had that fearlessness in her to stand in front of these killers, gunmen, and she would say, and I remember once that they was putting this gun on her head and telling her, asking questions, where is this man, where is your husband, where is your children? And she would say, you can shoot if you want, but you cannot get into the house to touch or to terrorize my children. So when I spoke with Liz about, how my mother would protect us and me and my siblings in that sort of situations, she asked me if I would talk about her. So in terms of the power of mothers and women to raise children, but also having a great impact, for me, she is my hero in the book, and she is my hero in my life. However, she is not the only mother or hero that has touched my life to the person that I've survived and here to talk to you. Many other mothers along the way, when I arrived in the UK, some in the form of different titles, some support workers, some carers, some social workers, some teachers, and some bosses and managers who, through my personal and professional lives, have helped me to become the person that I am today. So I think one thing that some of the values that I learned, not through by teaching, but by practices that she made. So she valued education, and she valued fairness and justice. And also she valued the courage to stand up against injustices when you had to face them. And I think some of these things stayed with me. So even if she wasn't with me physically, she was with me spiritually, because when I would face decisions, my mind would, flash back to how she would do things and how I should behave based on those teachings that she had taught me and my sibling. So when I arrived in the UK, in the first instance that I had the opportunity, I went to get an education. And the education, I started very late. So I started at 14. I'd never been to proper school before in education, but I really tried hard to get an education. And 10 years later, I graduated with a master's. And then when I started work, I could have chosen to do other jobs, but my first instinct was to help people. And who can I help? The victims of war and conflict, but particularly children who bear the brunt of these reckless wars and conflicts. So I went on to work with displaced people, internally displaced people back in Afghanistan, but also refugees and asylum seekers across borders. And I chose to work with children because, one, they are the most vulnerable. Two, they're the most impactful because they have the whole future in front of them. And by changing one life, you can change a future, if not many futures. And then just to sort of sum up, in addition to working with children, I was listening to so many stories and hopes and aspirations of these young people, children who had been displaced. And I'm just going to tell you a little story. When I was working with young people in a very protracted, tough condition camp in Western Rwanda, I helped them as part of my work to participate in sports and national programs. So they were able to join, taekwondo federations and kung fu and boxing and so on. So they were able to participate, and many of them won so many medals and trophies. So I went after their success. They became quite overnight celebrity, and then the media were interviewing them. So after that, I went and asked them, now that you have that fame and success, what would you do? And they all said, we want to use our voice to promote peace. In Congo, that's where they came from, but also around the world. And I said, why do you want to do that? They said, because no one can appreciate peace than us, who still suffer because of war and conflict. And we have been impacted the most. So this wasn't just one person, 10 medalists who had won 10 championship medals. And they all, one way or another, said they want to use their voice and they want to use their time and energy to promote peace, because peace is the most thing that they would appreciate. And that's how I wanted to write this book. This book is not about me. I wanted to bring up those stories, those hopes, those aspirations, but also those negative impacts, because millions of children and young people are scattered across the world in refugee camps, across borders. They drown in the seas, they die in the mountains, they freeze to death because they all flee war and conflict. But they all happen in silence. Not many are interested in hearing their stories. Just like Liz, you kindly mentioned those primary school girls who were bombed in the latest war in Iran. We do not hear, we just hear that they are bombed, but there are 170 souls, there are 170 futures. And but I wanted to bring these energy and hopes that the more we can talk and hear and raise awareness, the disastrous impacts of war and conflict, particularly on children, as Chris, you mentioned that the great speech by John F. Kennedy, that these children are our future. And if we can protect them, and if we do protect them by keeping them away from harms, but also by teaching them, and they can become the greatest force for positive change in the world. And that's why I have also started another charity. We named it Edu Change, and particularly focuses on educating and empowering children and young people who are impacted by war and conflict, and turning that experience and energy into a positive force for peace and justice.
Amen.
So I really thank you. I really thank you all for this opportunity. And I do apologize for lack of clear preparation, but I wanted to tell this story as unfiltered and read a little bit about my mother in the book, and having this conversation that when we all gather together and hearing stories like this, but also talking together, how together, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, from across borders, from around the world, joining hands and fighting for peace and justice. So thank you.
Thank you, Mir.
Thank
Wonderful.
you so much. So, wow. I mean, Mir, you really, are striking some chords and bringing it right home, because can you imagine? I mean, we just, as a country have unleashed, I don't know how many pounds of bombs, okay, killed thousands of children, okay, and there's no accountability at all. Okay, it just continues to happen. So I really, really appreciate your voice, Mir, because your voice isn't just, I mean, you're a little kid, you know, born in a war zone, and here you are taking it upon yourself to teach the world about that. Okay. And we need more mirrors in the world, you know. And so, again, I applaud you, and I really appreciate Liz bringing you here so that we can hear your story and we can talk about it and hopefully create a better future for our children.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for those very kind words. I think talking really helps. At times like this, sometimes we sort of feel maybe no point to talk about it because wars are increasing, death are constant. But I think silence is the problem, because if we can talk about the disastrous impacts of war on everyone, but particularly on children, and if we can raise and if we can tell each other about these issues and just having that conversation, I think it helps to raise awareness. It helps to bring up those lost voices and lost lives, and through that, if we can bring people together to just listen and to each other and talk to each other, and hopefully one day we will have a better peace, a peaceful world, and a place for everyone, regardless of their economic status, as Alana very nicely explained, but also their race, religion, or background. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we all aspire for the same thing. As much as we have been divided by so many categories and names, and race, religion, the economic status, and so on, but at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And if we understand that, and if we agree that we all are human beings and this small planet is our little home, and if we can see that greater vision, we will hopefully one day realize that killing whoever they may be, war, it may benefit the few, but it's disastrous for the majority. So if we can bring and raise awareness and bring the majority together, hopefully we'll have that peace one day. Even that little steps, so step by step, that we can go forward. Thank you. So I stop there.
Amen. Amen. Ruth?
Hi. So profound to hear your story and take in the simplicity of and the power of what you received from your mother. And one of the things that I was thinking about, and how it is that there's this in the West, all too often we feel like we're superior because we have all this technology and we have all of, and we talk, we look at other cultures and we assume they're backward. They need our technology in order to actually not be in poverty. And maybe perhaps they're not in poverty. Maybe in the integrity of their culture, they have everything they need because they have that capacity to have the connection that your mother had, to be able to pass down to her children the belief in an intelligence in the universe, an intelligence that helps her know that the most important thing is a child. A child is the seed of the future. It's like we are so intelligent, that we're killing all the seeds. We're killing all the seeds. And I was thinking about the purity of your motivation to bring it back home to the children, because I was thinking, first of all, we all have been children, and there are children in every culture, no matter how technologically advanced they are or not. And in the Bible, I think Christ said, a child shall lead them. And I think it's that innocence that when it's supported, has the power to grow and to create a positive future that you have done, because your mother had the connection to the truth to hold that for you, even in the midst of horror. So I'm just really appreciating that this motivation has so much. It's the root, it's the ground, it's what, and in order to actually have it be real, people have to understand they have been children, and that child lives inside of them as well. And that when that opens up, there's an open heart. There's an open heart that can change the whole world. And so I'm just really, I don't think I've heard anybody talk about peace from this place. And I feel how it goes deep inside of me. And I thank you. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
Liz?
Yes, I first wanted to mention my own thoughts, as I was taking in with my discussions with Mir, the potential of realizing that out of the experience that Mir has brought us, there has been a complete clarification of what's important. I think it causes you to have to really look at what you've been complaining about in your own life and say, wait a minute, I had little to complain about in comparison to what Mir has been describing, what was going on as he was being raised from birth to 13 in this environment and under these circumstances. And I also feel it's really important to recognize that I don't know. I may be wrong there. You correct me if I am, but I have a feeling there are a lot more of the kind of understanding, the kind of profound understanding that your mother displayed in the Afghan experience, that was more common, okay, than we might expect, especially in the United States, where you have a displacement of the natural gifts that people really rise to versus the architecture of not just the technology, but also academia, and where you're basically constantly layered with what's important. And it takes away some kind of ground knowledge that both parents, especially mothers, obviously, especially in the earlier stages, but both parents have to be able to provide this ground. Well, this has clearly been missing. This has been missing. In fact, when I think about my own life, my mother and father went out of their way to make sure that their children never, went without a meal. That was a big concern. They both lived in a world, when they were growing up with immigrant parents, and coming over from someplace with no resources. With food was, definitely, not there every day. So they had some priorities, and they made sure those things were in place. And we know that has been, a lot of the evolution of our experiences, as a nation. It's a very common experience. But we've reached a plateau where somehow the meaning of that has been lost. And I really felt that what Mir was giving us was that ground platform we all have to get back to, and we all have to help bring it forward, because the parents have to become at a level of, they have to accept that responsibility to be that kind of foundation for their own kids. And I think that's part of what really, we've lost in this country in many ways, and the children are not getting that kind of foundation. So that's why I felt on my own personal level that it was, it was a refocusing and looking back, at what's gone on in this country.
You mean Saturday morning cartoons aren't a foundation? Mr. Dodson.
So much to think about, right? I just gave a talk at my local library the other day on Earth Day. This is something that Lana has had a great deal of interest in, and a couple of years ago, she motivated me to do this little video on the history of Earth Day. And as I was talking to people in this group that came, I said to them, think about what Carl Sagan told us in his book Cosmos, and when he produced his PBS series on Cosmos. He said, look at the planet from space. There are no borders. We're all in this together. And John McConnell, who founded Earth Day, said that the three things we had to really work on. One was the economic issues, and he was a follower of Henry George. The other was monetary issues, our money creation. He didn't have any specific strong ideas about that. But the third thing he said we need to deal with if we're ever going to survive as a species on this planet is nationalism. And it seems to me that that's the great challenge that you're talking about here. That how do we get away from this idea that the earth is legitimately divided up into individual nation states, and each nation state is dominated by what amounts to one tribe of people who think of themselves as the legitimate heirs to whatever nature has provided. I don't know the answer. I think, many of us have been working on this problem since we've been young people, and we've decided we needed to do something. But it's clear that nationalism remains as one of the great obstacles to peace in the world. And that's what occurred to me. Thanks.
Okay. Ruth?
I'm just going to underline, and thank you, Edward. I really love what you said. I just want to reiterate what Liz was talking about, and these thoughts came to me that I think America is a country of orphans who are drowning in a sea of toxic material, bad food, and misaligned spirituality. And so we're orphans because we have, I think about, we're in a war zone, and the children in this country are in a war zone, and they're getting sicker and sicker because of this disconnection that you had that your life had the grace to implant you with, so that you could transmit the truth of the simplicity of this connection. And we here we're just we're creating orphans out of everybody. Yep. I just wanted to say that.
Amen. Alana.
Addressing nationalism and thoughts after. Thank you, Mir, hearing your heartfelt story. There was a gentleman, maybe he's 20 years older than me, he's no longer around, but out in California, Gene Haggerty, and he had a piece of paper, and he went around the world to world leaders signing the piece of paper, and the piece of paper said, "We are all human beings." I didn't get it at the time. I thought it was a kind of silly thing to do. Boy, do I get it now. I mean, isn't that the basics? And we've been mentioning this. Yeah, we're all human beings. Let's sign the paper, sign on. And then aware that there are networks forming now that we have the marvels of the internet. of Zoom calls like this of people in different countries, friendship making. Our former priest and journalist friend in Crimea, Regis Tremblay, tried to get a restart the sister city relationship. You know, most cities in the United States have a sister city with a city somewhere else in the world. Like in my small town, we have Gotemba City in Japan. Sister cities would exchange information about each other's cultures, exchange students, travel and visit each other's cities. But it's not very prevalent anymore. He wanted to get the one going between Russia and the United States, but the United States people, oh no, we don't want to talk to the Russians. That's absolutely horrific. So other people are trying to get that conversation between Russians and the United States people going, just to see each other as people. So Afghanistan, are there people? Do they have, I mean, can we get sister city relationships with people in Afghanistan? 10 people in Afghanistan, 10 people in the United States. Just so many basic ways we can begin to befriend each other. Okay, an idea. Also, there are about 50 colleges and universities in the United States that have peace studies programs. I was just looking at one in Pennsylvania at Juniata College at the Baker Institute. And so I think it might be fruitful to contact these peace studies programs to have Mir speak. And quite often they might have honorarium available. He can't keep doing this for free. But I mean, I think there's possibilities of some honorarium for him speaking at these peace studies institutes.
It's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Anybody want to speak?
Oh, he just came. Oh, that's too bad. Well, I'm always willing to throw a couple of more of my cents in. I love all of the connectivity that everyone is putting into this, because I can see that when Ruth said that we're really a country of orphans, there is something about having completely severed from the land that you came from, and this, of course, is not what most Afghans have lived with. Afghans have been on the land, if I'm not mistaken, Mir. We're talking about, this goes back thousands of years in this region, So there is a connectivity to the land that Americans basically don't have. And there is something, it's almost like we're missing something. And I think that the term orphan really does, resonate. That there is a level at which we've all been orphaned, not just we were once children going through that experience of actually being orphaned from the land. And so what you're bringing us, Mir, I think is a way to understand the meaning of having that profound connectivity to the land and the source of your being. Because remember, materially, we are literally made from the land where we were created from. And so there is a material relationship that people have to the source. And so being able to bring some kind of understanding of what we need to grow here is, and I think your mother and your community, it sounded to me as if we have the basics of helping people understand how it works, how it actually can work, even in the worst of circumstances. And the irony is, bad things can happen that aren't even necessarily intended to be bad. It's about people having a responsive system that knows what to do, that knows how to get everyone to produce the best outcome of whatever's just happened. And that's what I felt that you were really giving us in your stories.
I'd just like to say that as Americans, and what Ruth said about the fact that, we really are orphans, well, certainly our ideas are orphaned. I've been fortunate enough to know and to visit the place where my grandfather came from in Ireland, and we stayed there in 1997. We went back to visit them and spent 5 or 6 days there. And the woman that we stayed with up the street, Ruth actually came and visited with us. She said to me, she said, you know, you're just like them. She said, you could have been born here. You're no different. She said, I'd never seen it quite so clearly. So that was, you know, that was kind of striking for me. And I've had that all my life. I've had this sense of needing to know where I came from and what their values were and what it was like there. And to be able to go back there, it was kind of like a rebirth in a sense, because it was, they were doing me a great favor by helping me define areas that I knew existed in my personality, in my view of the world. And I got it nailed down to a few square miles of this place called Abbeyfale in Ireland. And you know, and I got to experience it with my wife and my kids and my mother and my aunt. And you know, it was unusual for an American. And I think that's a big, I mean, you know, one of the things that I have read about, you know, the ancients, the wisdom of the ancients was that the maxim of know yourself. And if you can't know yourself until you know where you came from. And Mir, I think, you know, Mir knows himself. Mir knows where he came from. Mir didn't grow up in an artificial environment, in an artificial society that was created with ideals from founding fathers that we didn't know and that we didn't descend from. And so as a result of that, I mean, I'm sure I know we have plenty of friends here in Boston who were descendants of, you know, the original people who participated in Concord and Lexington, and it's very close to where we live. And when people come to visit, I take them to those places, and I consider them to be sacred places. The Concord Bridge is something very important. It really evokes a personality of the place and the feeling of what I felt certainly growing up here about what it meant to be an American. But you know, that's not America today. That is something else, and we really, I think, we need to look to to Mir's experience as a, you know, as an example of something that we need to know ourselves better. And certainly the things that we are facing today are generations of Americans have never faced the kinds of psychological problems and the kind of ethical problems and philosophical problems. And we got to find those things to help people. And that's what Chris has been doing by publishing these various books about different things. He's helping people do that. But I'm being specific about it. I really think we got to know more about us before we get much further into this disaster that's being created for us as human beings. And so I'd sign that paper. I am a human being, and I'm not a number. And I'm part of the things that we've been developing, the mathematization of reality that went on in the Renaissance and with John Dee and people like that. It got filtered into the process of government, and we really got to work on all these angles and start looking at these things very specifically and take the needle off this record and let people just be and do with each other by reestablishing community and real community, not an artificial one. So that's my 2 cents worth today. I added to Liz's 2 cents. So we're up to 4.5.
4.5 cents.
Ruth, you have some more to say?
Yeah, you know, it's the part about the power of your mother's belief in herself and the connection that she had with the whole universe, and the power to stand up to somebody with a gun who's threatening to shoot her and to not have an ounce of fear inside, to believe and know that she had that power, and that power was stronger than those guns. And this kind of power is something that happens when you really do know yourself, because yourself is a conduit of divine knowing from the earth to the heavens and back again. And when you really know that, you know you've got the wind of the whole universe behind your back. And I know that we have been, and that you have the power. If you need something, you can create it out of the imagination of yourself, that you will create it, you will make it happen. Our imaginations have been made soggy with shit and our capacity to stand in the knowing of what we believe in. It's like we've been cut off at the knees. We can't stand because we've been told that we have no power, and we believe it. And so when you tell that story about your mother, I think that this is something that it encodes that, all of that, and the power of somebody who knows that in every cell in their body. And that's what we need to reclaim. We all need to reclaim it in order to have the strength to stand up for the seed of our future.
Amen. Mir, you got your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth, for those very kind comments. I think all mothers probably, when they face a situation where their children are at real risk, there are men with guns and shooting, and I think, and I think I think all mothers would stand up and they would put themselves first before before their children. So I do not think that it is limited to my mother, but the fact that throughout my professional lives and also my life, being supported, it's been mostly mothers and women who have been very kind in providing those support. For, when I did humanitarian works, 80 to 90% of the humanitarian field are filled by those kind-hearted women who are helping people in dire conditions. So I think it is probably that motherhood, the feeling of protecting your children, but also when you understand that, how you love your children, and also that love extends to the children of other people as well. So I think it's not probably fair they say you as Americans or not, because I think there are a lot of kind-hearted people who are working very hard for peace, for justice, for relieving poverty, up and down the country, but also around the world. But I think one thing that we do, as Alana, was it Ruth Alana said this, we've made to believe that we do not have power. We've made to believe that we are powerless, because I think that is probably intentional, because if we all think that we do have power and use that power, we probably can make that change. But in order to for those who wants us believe that we are powerless, so we are paralyzed, we do not do anything, therefore they can go ahead and do whatever they like. That is something that probably intentionally, through the power of media, made us feel. So if we all believe that we do have that power and use it, we can bring about that change. So maybe it's more about the mentality of being forced to believe, or that sort of manufactured consent or belief that we cannot do anything. I'm just one person, so therefore I sit back and just ignore. Because I do believe that the majority of the people, the very top few people who benefit from war, conflict, and injustices, I think the majority of the people, particularly mothers and women, I am not negating the role of men, because I think there are a lot of men as well who are working very hard towards peace, justice, and humanity. But particularly today we talk about mothers, because I think around the world there are very hardworking, very kind women and mothers who are working very hard if not directly confronting those injustices, but helping people who are being impacted by it. That is a real evidence. So that it doesn't, it's not that it's, there are Americans, there are Europeans, there are from across continents. People are working very hard day and night to at least relieve those suffering and injustices. But I think one key thing there is that if we believe that we do have power, and we use that power and we connect and unite together, we can bring about that real change that nothing and no one can stop us. If one of us, two of us, 10 of us, 1,000, a million, 10 million, millions of us join hands together and work towards peace and justice, we can definitely bring about that change. So it is that idea of being forced to believe that we are powerless and we just sit back, or we just do what we can within by helping those who are impacted by these injustices. I think if we believe in ourselves, we can bring about that change. And I do think the majority of the people in the world are, people, decent people with the right values, who believe in peace and justice. And if we unite, we can bring about that change.
Amen. Amen. Denver, you have some thoughts?
Yes. Thank you, Chris. And apologies for being a little bit late. That couldn't be helped. And so, Mir, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. And so I wanted to just add to what you're saying, because when it comes down to this aspect of what we're giving up, with a level of complacency, most people don't realize that they're basically surrendering their divine free will, which is our greatest strength. And that's also where the power of our own manifestation comes in. And so when you also combine that with a level of healing, whether or not it's emotional or physical, and how we basically create the environment around us, it also echoes for eternity. And so an example of this was shared with me recently, where a loving, kind note that I wrote to somebody at a coffee shop in 2019, I just received an email from someone who found that note 8 years later and reached out to me to thank me for that act of kindness, because she's starting to understand the depth of how important that energy is in those small acts of kindness. And that's where we can really come together in a coherent level, because once we are souls, a lot of people talk about awakening, but it's really remembering where we come from the source energy. And so it's, there's so much depth to what you're sharing, and it is so far beyond the words, but it's the emotions that they imply and that they harness and that they carry. But I just wanted to share a few of those thoughts, and it's a genuine pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to learning more about your story. Thank you for the time.
Well, thank you. And, people have been bringing up some things here, and I've been thinking about, the circle of humanity, okay, and how we can join together in hands, okay, and create a better world. And it is up to us. And one thing that's been going on, I talk about secret societies and all this type of stuff, and about how they're trying to impose their will upon us. Okay, but and they're basically a pyramid, okay, of hierarchy, okay, and if the person above you tells you to do something, you're supposed to do that, okay. Well, I find that that's not the way to run a railroad, okay. We need to join hands in a giant circle around this world. So, before we close this out, any last words from folks, from Liz?
Yeah, I actually wanted to just make a suggestion for everyone. After I found out that the name that Mir was given means world peace, I began to think about every one of us has been named, and I wonder how many of us actually ever looked up the meaning of our name. Maybe there's something there for you that you might want to know right now. It may give you a hint, to something about again, the thing that Denver is bringing up about remembering. Well, The idea of being able to literally remember deeply your purpose may very well have absolutely something to do with the name that you were given and the meaning of that name. And I just thought it would be a genuinely useful adventure for everyone to do that. And maybe our next roundtable, if you actually look it up, we can find out the meaning of everybody's name and see how we can use it to further our cause for world peace.
Amen.
And just add that the word mir in Russian means peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's I think it's Afghani, but it must have some root meaning in other languages.
Yeah, well, that is the Russian. That is.
I think their space station was called Mir,
right?
I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it was, whether that was intentional, with, go with a name that means peace or world peace. So I have no idea. I have to ask. But the fact that now it has turned out to mean world peace, and particularly at this time, in moment in time where we need peace so much. So I'm very grateful for that name, and I really hope that at least it sort of, now that I know, I mean, I knew a while back that's what it meant, world peace. So at least motivate me in. But of course, I think all names and most names have very, very, that's why you named it, they have a good meaning. So whether they are, means kindness or forgiving or peace or justice. So I'm sure that if you look, because you don't usually look at your name, that's your name given to you, right? Yeah. So if you look at it, then so I'm sure that we will have a lot of great meaning in your names as well, and discuss about that. But thank you, Liz, for bringing that the meaning of my name, and it's great to have that discussion about peace.
Well, I like to make a very big deal out of that kind of coincidence happening. I think that's how you get actually, kind of empower ideas, is that you recognize that this is some kind of connectivity that's happening through this. And it's a reminder, I said, this is part of the remember. And considering what was going on when you were born, I mean, when they talk about a war was going on and a birth was going on, they don't usually mean right in the exact place where the birth is going on. So I think that, the irony of that just screams, there's some significance there to me.
Well, my name was Robert from my dad, and it's an old German name, and it means bright fame or shining glory. But then a girl in college says, "Well, you look more like a Chris than a Bob," so I go by Chris. So well, again, I like to end these things with the words from JFK. And I'd like to read from a speech that he gave at Amherst College in Massachusetts on October 26, 1963, less than a month before he was killed. Our national strength matters, but the spirit which informs and controls our strength matters just as much. This was the special significance of Robert Frost. He brought an unsparing instinct for reality to bear on the platitudes and pieties of society. His sense of the human tragedy fortified him against self-deception and easy consolation. "I have been," he wrote, "one acquainted with the night." And because he knew the midnight as well as the high noon, because he understood the ordeal as well as the triumph of human spirit, he gave the age strength with which to overcome despair. At bottom, he held deep faith and in the spirit of man, and is hardly an accident that Robert Frost coupled poetry and power. For he saw that poetry as the means of saving power from itself. When power leads men towards arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the areas of man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and the diversity of his existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. For art establishes the basic human truth which must serve as the touchstone of our judgment. The artist, however faithful to his personal vision of reality, becomes the last champion of the individual mind and sensibility against an intrusive society and an officious state. The great artist is thus a solitary figure. He has, as Frost said, a lover's quarrel with the world. In pursuing his perception of reality, he must often sail against the currents of his time. This is not a popular role. If Robert Frost was much honored in his lifetime, it was because a good many preferred to ignore his darker truths. Yet in retrospect, we see how the artist's fidelity has strengthened the fiber of our national life. If sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because of their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, and makes him aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. I see little of more importance to the future of our country and our civilization than recognition of the place of the artist. If art is to nourish the roots of our culture and society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. It is a form of truth. And as Mr. McLeish once remarked of poets, there is nothing worse for our trade than to be in style. In free society, art is not a weapon, and it does not belong to the spheres of polemic and ideology. Artists are not the engineers of the soul. It may be different elsewhere, but democratic society, in it, the highest duty of a writer, the composer, the artist, is to remain true to himself and to let the chips fall where they may. In serving his vision of the truth, the artist best serves his nation. And the nation which disdains the mission of art invites the fate of Robert Frost's hired man, the fate of having nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope. I look forward to a great future for America, a future in which our country will match its military strength with our moral restraint, its wealth with our wisdom, its power with our purpose. I look forward to an America which will not be afraid of grace and beauty, which will protect the beauty of our natural environment and will preserve the great old American houses and squares and parks of our national past, and which will build handsome and balanced cities for our future. I look forward to an America which will reward achievement in the arts as we reward achievement in business or statecraft. I look forward to an America which will steadily raise the standards of artistic accomplishment and will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all of our citizens. And I look forward to an America which commands respect throughout the world, not only for its strength, but for its civilization as well. And I look forward to a world which will be safe, not only for democracy and diversity, but also for personal distinction. Robert Frost was often skeptical about projects for human improvement. Yet I do not think he would disdain this hope. As he wrote during the uncertain days of the Second War, take human nature altogether since time began, and it must be a little more in favor of man. Say a fraction of 1% at the very least. Our hold on this planet wouldn't have so increased. Amen. And again, onwards to a better future for our children. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank
you, Mir.
everybody for your time, and see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.